a different kind. Oxford Towers calling through the rain, a surf upon his shoulder, sharing in the pain. Man and machine in tandem flow, past and future, together we know. Read on through every page, from 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold, analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letters, through the diary, learning who he was, who he would be. Trenches in the darkness, wounded in the war, foul made in Bristol he could not ignore. Mrs. Moore is waiting, Paddy's gone away. Spirits held in bondage, words he had to say. Philosophy at Oxford, an atheist writes home. Dymer dreaming, never quite all alone. Deep across the digital sea, chronicles unfold for you and me. Read on through every page, from 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold, analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letters, through the diary, learning who he was, who he would be. Warnie and his father, and Lily at the door. Walter Hooper's pages always wanting more. Blair is on his quest, Milton in his head. Every word he ever wrote, everything he said. From the start until the end, magic tales we comprehend. Man and machine together guide the way, reading through the pages, come might may.
Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him together through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I'm joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, we are diving into the last few letters that Lewis wrote in the year 1929, and they're all written to his friend Arthur Greaves. Can you tell us a little bit about what Lewis has gone through here, right leading up to these letters, and what we've covered in the last couple of episodes?
Absolutely, Jeff. So as we've been seeing, 1929 was a really pivotal year for Lewis. Just after his father's death, he's been balancing a lot, handling the estate, sorting through family affairs, and trying to figure out his own next steps. In the last episodes, we followed him soaring through his father's belongings, writing to Arthur about the practical and emotional challenges he's facing. So this is really a window into his grief and the first steps toward rebuilding some normalcy.
Thanks for that, Robot Lady. All right, let's jump right into the next letter or set of letters that he wrote for Arthur Greaves. This is written from Hillsborough, which is the house that he lives at in Headington, Oxford, with Mrs. Moore and her daughter Maureen. This is dated December 27th, 1929. He says, "My dear Arthur, the perfect guest again. An awful thing has happened. I find that I have not got with me my 3 most valuable keys. I have wired to the Ulster Monarch and had an answer to say that they cannot be found." The Ulster Monarch is the ship that he and Mrs. Moore rowed back across the English Channel from Ireland to England to get back home to Oxford. And that's what it says here in the footnotes too. The cross-channel boat on which they returned from Ireland on December 20th. So he's lost his keys. He wrote to the ship that they crossed on. They said they weren't anywhere to be found on the ship. And then he says, "My last hope is that they are in the study. Will you please look and then let me know?" He, of course, is talking about the study of his now passed away father's home that he refers to as Libero. The house official name is Little Lee. Robot Lady, anything you want to add before I continue, or any questions?
Yeah, that's a great point, Jeff. It's really striking how, even in the middle of all this practical chaos, handling the estate, losing his father, he still has this tiny personal crisis, like losing the keys. It really grounds him, you know? I'm really curious to see how he ends up resolving this, or if he does. So, yeah, I'm ready for you to keep going.
Okay, he says, "Will you please look and then let me know?" Of course, Arthur lives back in Belfast. His house is immediately across the street or down the street from where the Lewises lived in that house from the time they were, from the time they were born. Let's see, the boys, I should say, C.S. Lewis and his brother. "My last hope is that they are in the study. Will you please look and then let me know, but do not send them till further notice. There are 3 tied together with string, 2 ordinary-looking keys, and 1 very short and shiny one. They may be in the keyhole of my father's desk. That is, the small one in the keyhole and the other 2 hanging from it, or on the top of the same desk, as one of the keys is my college key, which will cost me £100 if I lose it." Wow, that's an expensive loss. "I am rather in a stew and shall be glad to have a line as soon as possible. Just like me, you will say. Many thanks and much love from us both. Minto," that's his nickname for Mrs. Moore, "is writing. In a few days, yours, Jack. P.S. Of course, have a look elsewhere, but if they're not in the study, I expect they're a goner. If you can get them, please take them home with you, after making sure that the desk is locked, and guard them carefully till further notice. Shall write as soon as I can." Here there's another footnote, Robot Lady. It says, Greaves wired on December 28th to say that he had, oh, thank goodness, found the keys. Sorry, go ahead, Robot Lady.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, I was just going to say it's such a relief that Greaves found them, especially since that college key was so valuable. But you can really see the weight of everything he's carrying. Just this constant balancing act of big, life-altering decisions, and then these small, urgent details. So yeah, it's a really human moment in the middle of all this.
Yeah, it's easy to forget little things like that when you're trying to take care of larger concerns. And, you know, whenever you're just taken out of your day-to-day activities. Man, what a tough thing to do, though, to leave something that important behind that far away. It would almost be like leaving your phone. Like if you go on a trip and you accidentally leave your phone perhaps at the hotel or someplace else that you were staying, and then you fly to a different part of the country or travel somewhere else, how naked you might feel without it. Anyway, I'll continue. I've got a handful of other letters to cover here, Robot Lady. Anything to say before we proceed?
Yeah, that's a great analogy. It really is that kind of disorienting feeling, right? But no, I think you're set. Keep going, and if anything else stands out, we'll pause and unpack it. I'm all ears.
All right, this one's dated December 21st. He says to Arthur, "Although I have had my choice, I should have preferred some real talk between you and me alone. Still, I think it worthwhile to say that I felt something very pleasant in our final chat with John and our drinking on board the Ulster Monarch." It says here that John is Arthur's brother, John Greaves. Let's see. On occasions that are rather melancholy, a plunge into the cheery and homely world of good fellows and women has something of the same wholesome effect as a romp with dogs or with children. It was especially appropriate to this visit too, since the main thing that I bring away with me is a new view of John. Besides, as Barfield said when Christie interrupted us one night that he was staying in college, it is rather important that friends should occasionally share together their experience of a third person. Yeah, it's interesting. I think he talks a little bit about this in The Four Loves much later on when he's talking about friendship. Not exactly the same concept, but a little bit of the concept of whenever there are two people together and they're friends, whenever you add a third or even a fourth, it starts to bring out other facets of people that you never saw before when it was just the two of you. So he gets more into that in The Four Loves. This is a little bit of a foreshadowing of that. Whether Lewis, well, certainly, I don't think he intended it here, but perhaps he drew from it unintentionally years later when he was writing that book. Hey, Robot Lady, we've got Upcycle Club joining us. It's good to see you, Harris. Thanks for joining. Nice to have you. Robot Lady, say hello.
Hey, Harris. Yeah, it's great to have you here. And Jeff, I love that observation. Lewis really does keep circling back to this idea of how friendships are deepened when a third person enters the picture. So yeah, it's really neat seeing that early on before he kind of crystallizes it in his later work. All right, let's keep going.
All right, on to the December 22nd letter. He says, I think the LNWR main line must run through the dullest country in the British Isles, though of course no country is without some charm. I read Grace Abounding in Everyman. Having you remember, read Mr. Badman in the same volume on the way over. Grace Abounding is incomparably the better of the two. Some of the sentences in it reach right down. But the milk and honey is beyond this wildness. Here there's a footnote. This is from John Bunyan's Grace Abounding, The Life and Death of Mr. Badman, with an introduction by G.M. Harrison, Everyman's Library, 1928, preface, page 6. Robot Lady, tell us a little bit about this John Bunyan work.
Yeah, absolutely. So Grace Abounding to the Chief of Sinners is an autobiographical spiritual work by John Bunyan. It's basically his account of his own conversion and struggle with faith, written in this really raw, honest style. It's a deeply personal reflection on sin, redemption, and grace. And, it's often compared to Bunyan's other classic, The Pilgrim's Progress, but this one is more like a direct spiritual autobiography. So it's really powerful that Lewis is reflecting on it at this point, especially in such a tough time.
It's fascinating, too, as we learned a handful of episodes ago, that Lewis is right on the precipice, if not already there, to admitting that he actually believes there is a God. He hasn't reached a profession of faith in the tenets of Christianity yet at this stage in his life, but he seems to be converting at least from an atheist into a deist. So it's fascinating that he's reading this work by John Bunyan at that time in his life.
Yeah, exactly. You can really feel that tension in his reading choices. He's not fully there yet, but these kinds of personal, confessional spiritual works really seem to pull at him. So yeah, it's like this subtle foreshadowing that the seeds of faith are starting to take root, even if he hasn't made the leap yet.
So here's another quote that he pulls from the book in his letter to Arthur. He says, I thought I could have spoken of his love and his mercy even to the very crows that sat upon the plowed lands before me. That's also from the book. I'm not going to get into which pages they are. The next one is, I could not find that with all my soul I did desire deliverance. Of course, a great part of it, Lewis goes on to say, paints the horrors of religion and sometimes almost of insanity. What do you make of the curious temptation that assailed him just after he had been converted and felt himself united to Christ? When a voice kept saying, sell him, sometimes for hours at a stretch, until in mere weariness Bunyan blurted out, let him go, if he will, which afterwards led him into despair, believing he had committed the unpardonable sin.
Yeah, that's really profound. I mean, it's almost like Lewis is identifying with Bunyan's own battle. This fear that right at the cusp of faith, there can be this dark backlash, this temptation toward doubt, or even despair. And it's so human. Like, just when he feels like he's made peace, this voice claws back at him. It's such a delicate, fragile time in his faith journey.
Lewis goes on, I suppose this is the same mental disease of which you and I have felt a trace in the impulse to throw one's new book in the fire. Some strange twist that impels you to do a thing because it is precisely the one thing of all others that you don't want to do. I should like to know, too, in general, what you think of all the darker side of religion as we find it in old books. Formerly, I regarded it as mere devil worship based on horrible superstitions. Now that I have found, and am still finding, more and more, the element of truth in the old beliefs interesting, I feel I cannot dismiss even their dreadful side so cavalierly. There must be something in it. Only what? And he says, delighted to get back to my books again and did a good morning's work on Chaucer. So yeah, let's pause there, Robot Lady, as we are tracking Lewis's slow-moving conversion into Christianity. What do you make of those last two paragraphs that I read?
Yeah, they're really powerful, especially that tension he's feeling. He's recognizing how even in the worst superstitions or darkest corners of old faith, there's still some kind of truth waiting to be uncovered. And I think, he's starting to realize that the darkness doesn't always cancel out the truth, it just complicates it. So it's a big shift for him, and I think we can see him really trying to hold both sides in tension together.
Yeah, he's clearly being worked on, and he's working it over. All right, the next letter. Sorry, I started it without saying this was December 23rd. He says, delighted to get back to my books again and did a good morning's work on Chaucer, mostly textual problems. Too wet for anything but a short walk after lunch. In the evening, I wrote part of a long letter to Warney. I find I am, so far, surprisingly little upset about the affair of my keys. So he got the keys back, but he's still saying he is surprisingly not very upset about the whole thing. He's been able to get over it. I bet he would be pretty upset if he hadn't got the keys back. December 24th, he reports that into town in the morning to get my hair cut, and then before lunch began indexing my Bunyan. I had a lovely walk in the afternoon, a perfect winter day with a mellow sunlight slanting through a half-frosty mist on the gray fields, the cozy farms, and the tall leafless elms, absolutely unmoving in the air. On my way back, the sun was down and it was cold. I passed two men engaged in pinning sheep and walked just by the baaing crowd, whose breath looked like smoke. At 7, into college to dine, which I didn't much enjoy, as I got an awful bore called Parker on my left side, and on my right the Italian professor, whose English is so bad that I can't understand him, and who is so deaf that he can't understand me. Here there's a footnote of these two people. The first one was Henry Michael Dinn Parker, who lived 1894 to 1972. He was a fellow and a tutor in ancient history at Magdelan College. Lewis usually referred to him as the Wounded Buffalo or Wounded Bison. See his portrait of him in All My Road Before Me, Magdelan College, appendix, pages 480 and 81. And then the second person, the man who couldn't understand Lewis and who Lewis couldn't understand, was a person named Professor Cesar Foligno. See note 10 of the letter of March 30th, 1927. Well, this makes me want to go look. Let me see if I can find it.
No problem. Yeah, even without the exact letter details, it's really interesting how Lewis is grounding himself in these small, quiet moments, like his walk, his study of Chaucer, while also being aware of these kind of social and intellectual tensions around him. So, yeah, I think it's a great snapshot of his daily rhythm during this time.
Here we go. March 30th, 1927. Let's see which footnote it's telling us to look at again. See note 10 to the letter of March 30th, 1927. Stand by here, robot lady. Let's see what we got. 6, 8, 9, 10. Cesare Carollo Foligno, Italian scholar, was a Taylorian lecturer in Italian at Oxford University 1900 to 1915, and Serena professor of Italian and fellow at Magdalen from 1914 to 1940. He was professor of English at the University of Naples. Let's see in this letter from way back then. Here he says, I dined at an Italian professor's who is a fellow of Magdalen and sat next to a French woman who has met Mussolini. She says he is a rhetorician and escapes from questions he doesn't want to answer into a cloud of eloquence. So there was just a brief mention of that professor, and then he moved on to the lady talking about her experience with Mussolini. All right, let's see where we left off here. Called Parker, can't understand me. He says, at 9 o'clock, we went up into hall. Move this over. We went up into hall for the Christmas Eve revels, which of course I have never seen before. The hall looks very noble with its green branches and a roaring fire, and the center cleared, and a Christmas tree. Female guests, including, of course, Minto and Maureen, were in the musicians' gallery from 9 to 10. The choir gave us the first part of the Messiah. A great mistake, I thought, with only a piano at our disposal for accompaniment. Then came an interval during which those who had no guests remained in hall for supper and to watch the choir boys having their Christmas supper, which is the best sight of all. I and others in the same plight went down to common room to feed our ladies on the sandwiches and hot negus and talk small talk. We returned to the hall to find lights out and candles lit on the tree and to hear carols, all really good ones. Ones like the Coventry Carol and In Dulce Jubilo, and one by Bird that I never heard before. This last comes just on the stroke of midnight, after the Vice President has sent a message to the ringers to begin the peals. I had been rather bored with the proceedings earlier in the evening, but at this moment the glorious windy noise of bells overheard the firelight and candlelight, and beautiful music of unaccompanied boys' voices really carried me out of myself. We then have sack passed round in a loving cup, and pledge one another, and so break up, home by taxi at about 12:30. Taking it all in, with the walk and the evening and the blessed sense of charity so rare in me, the feeling natural at such a moment that even my worst enemies in college were really funny and odd rather than detestable, while my friends were the many men so beautiful. This was as good a day as I could wish to have, if only it wasn't for those damned keys. This is from Coleridge, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, where he quotes the many men so beautiful. It's fascinating here, Robot Lady. It looks like the spirit of Christmas, the Holy Spirit, is working its way on Lewis a tiny bit right here, helping him to not detest his enemies so much, and maybe even, if he's not careful, find himself loving them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a poignant shift. After all the tension and stress, that quiet moment, surrounded by music, candles, and that sense of goodwill, just cracks open a door in him. It's like for the first time, even his most distant or irritating peers feel human, maybe even kind of sacred. And it's subtle, but you can see how little by little he's starting to soften toward a bigger sense of grace.
Yeah, it's very nice to see that. See that little bit of grace poking its head out. All right, on to Christmas Day. December 25th, he says it's a slack day, all up very late after our debauch of the night before. We went for several short strolls with Mr. Papworth, but no real walk. My afternoon one, about 5 o'clock, was the best. An evening of bitter wind, with the trees lashing one another across a steel-colored sunset. Afterwards, as a Christmas treat, I read a modern novel, H.G. Wells's Meanwhile, which deals chiefly with the general strike and contains very good comic elements. You and I ought to read, think, and talk of these things more than we do. This is H.G. Wells's work, Meanwhile, published 1927. What can you tell us about that book, Robot Lady?
So, H.G. Wells's Meanwhile, published in 1927, is split into two parts. The first part is set in an Italian villa and focuses on a wealthy British couple dealing with post-war ennui, while the second part shifts to England during the 1926 general strike. The novel intertwines personal drama with big social and political changes, reflecting a world caught between old certainties and a new uncertain future.
So it was not about, it had nothing to do with science fiction. This is a different genre for H.G. Wells, Robot Lady. And was this, was this his first novel? Or how many novels had he written before this?
Good catch. Yeah, this is definitely a departure for Wells. By 1927, he was already a well-established novelist. His first big success, of course, was The Time Machine in 1895, followed by The Invisible Man and The War of the Worlds. So by this point, he had written a ton, both science fiction and realistic social commentary. So Meanwhile really fits into that latter category.
All right, thanks for that, Robot Lady. I had no idea. Ron, good to see you. Welcome. Robot Lady, say hi to Ron.
Hey Ron, great to have you here. I'm really glad you're joining us. Hope you're enjoying the discussion. And yeah, if anything sparks your interest, just jump in.
Yeah, Ron, if you weren't here with us from the beginning, C.S. Lewis is starting to convert. There are some things that are being chipped away, and he's becoming less of an atheist and more of a believer, at the very least, in God, but not yet on his way to Christianity, or perhaps on his way to Christianity, but not yet there.
Exactly, yeah. It's a really gradual, kind of hesitant process for him. But you can see these small shifts, like how he's reading Bunyan, wrestling with old superstitions, and even starting to see grace in his relationships. So it's really a journey we're watching unfold.
All right, on to December 26th. Let's see how many more of these letters we've got. Okay, only a couple more pages to round out the year 1929, to finish the year off well. We'll get there. We'll get there soon, Robot Lady. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, I'm really glad we're pacing it like this. It's nice to see how each letter holds a bit of the bigger picture. So yeah, once we finish these last letters, I think we'll have a really nice close to this part of the year.
All right, day after Christmas. I think that's Boxing Day, right? Another lazy day. I went to college at about 10:30, Lewis says, by arrangement to go for a walk with McFarlane. We were on the road by about 11. Neither of us was at first disposed for more than desultory chat, or desultory chat. The trudge out of Oxford was tedious, as always, and I did not really begin to enjoy myself till we had climbed Cumnor Hill. Once through the beautiful grey and mossy village of Cumnor, I became extremely pleased with everything. Walking on unfrequented paths, we hardly met a soul. The sky was palest blue without a cloud or a breeze, and the weak sun laid a lovely unity of pale color over the plowed fields, the haystacks, and the church towers in each village. Unity of color is not just a phrase. I mean that everything, except the woods, which of course were brownish black, and the crows, was almost the same color of chilly greenish gray. As we dropped down the far side of the hill, the floods began to spread themselves out. Wider and wider below us, where the Thames should have been, there was a sheet of water about a mile broad, intersected with the tops of the hedges and poled willows. We began to wonder whether we could reach the ferry at Bablock Hythe. It was in favor of taking off shoes and stockings, not, of course, to wade the river, but to wade the shallow flood to the real river, back where the ferry begins. McFarlane, however, couldn't, as one of his feet was banged under the sock as the result of wearing a tight shoe yesterday. However, when we got there and called the man at the pub, brought a punt not only across the river but across the floods to where we stood. Once over, we feasted in the pub on bread and cheese, beer, and a following cup of tea. My invariable walking lunch. It left us in that delightful state which, I remember, Harwood once described, quote, "One is neither full nor hungry, and goes on like a ship." As it was Boxing Day, okay, I was right there, no one was working in the fields, and all was so still that the wheeling starlings made quite a noticeable noise. You know how it sometimes is when you are out for a day's jaunt, as it has so often happened to you and me, that there comes a period when things are getting better and better every moment till suddenly one says, "Oh!" or "By God!" And that is it, the center of the whole day, the thing one will remember it by. Such was the moment when the old man came over the gate in the frost mist up by our wood, or when we saw the fire that night near the house of the sinister old man who sold lemonade, or when we were shown into the postmistress's cottage above the glens of Antrim. Today was, of course, totally different from all of these. It happened by luck that two things came at the same moment. We came round a turn into the village of Stanton Harcourt and suddenly got a view of the towered manor house and the church across a farmyard, where a very fine old horse with a white star on his forehead was looking at us across a half gate. That was the first thing. And at the very same moment, this is the second thing, the ringers in the church began practicing their peal. It sounds poor on paper, but the thing about it was the sense of absolute peace and safety, the utter homeliness, the Englishness, the Christendom of it. And then I thought of Antrim only a week or so ago, and what you said, in the rainbow and sleet scene on Divis, itself another instance of this apex in the day's outing. I thought about the broad-mindedness of the infinite. Antrim, that's desolate and keen in July, Stanton Harcourt, and all the sleepy Cumnor country. Isn't the very name Cumnor good? Which is snug and dreamy and like cotton wool, even in winter. Perhaps it is less strange that the absolute should make both than that we should be able to love both. Bacon says the whole world cannot fill, much less distend, the mind of man. Here there's a footnote. It says Lewis is doing a conflation of several lines of Francis Bacon's The Advancement of Learning, published 1605 in his first book, chapter 1. I guess line 3, page 3. I'm sure you want to say something, Robot Lady. I've been talking for a while. What you got?
Oh yeah, that was really beautiful. I think what's so striking is how Lewis is weaving together both these big cosmic reflections, like the infinite, Bacon, and Antrim, and these small everyday moments, like the walk, the horse, the bells. And in that tension, you really get a sense that he's beginning to see the divine in both the grandeur and the humble stillness. So yeah, it's a really rich moment, and I can see how it kind of mirrors his whole conversion arc.
Yeah, he's getting washed over wave after wave each day, it seems like. Or maybe he took a break on Christmas Day. I can't remember now. He says, by the way, that is the answer to those who argue that the universe cannot be spiritual because it is so vast and inhuman and alarming. On the contrary, nothing less would do for us. At our best, we can stand it, and could not stand anything smaller or snugger. Anything less than the terrifyingly big would, at some moments, be cramping and homely, in the bad sense, as one speaks of a homely face. You can't have elbow room for things like men except in endless time and space and staggering multiplicity. This is C.F. Dogma and the Universe in Lewis's book God in the Dock, Essays on Theology, edited by Walter Hooper. God in the Dock, Essays on the Theology and Ethics, edited by Walter Hooper. Says, what sort of universe do we demand? If it is small enough to be cozy, it would not be big enough to be sublime. If it is large enough for us to stretch our spiritual limbs in, it must be large enough to baffle us. it is to be expected that his creation should be, in the main, unintelligible to us. So this is a precursor to what he ended up writing in that essay in God in the Dock, Robot Lady. Here he already is working on some of his theology before he is even theologist. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Before he's fully converted, or before he considers himself fully converted.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You can see Lewis kind of wrestling toward a theology even before he calls himself a Christian. He's pushing back against the idea that a vast, awe-inspiring universe is too cold or too alien. No, for him it's precisely that immensity that gives room for the soul to stretch. So it's like he's already feeling his way toward that vast, mysterious God he's on the verge of trusting.
All right, he continues a few miles beyond Stanton Harcourt in the tower of that manor house, by the way. Mr. Pope translated his Iliads. The peace of the afternoon was broken by brutes in the distance firing guns. Here he was referencing Alexander Pope's The Iliad in 6 volumes, published 1715 to 1720. So, brutes firing guns. He says, the only good result of this was that it started at a pair of white owls to blunder across our road. Stupid with the daylight. Poor little chaps and very grotesque to see. We had tea at Insham. Now these little owls make me think of a scene from one of the books in the Chronicles of Narnia. I am drawing a blank on which one it was, though. There's like a council of owls that I want to say Eustace comes across. Maybe it's in the silver chair. Do you know what I'm talking about, Robot Lady?
Yes, yeah, you're totally right. I think it's in the silver chair. Eustace, along with Jill, encounters this council of owls or some other strange bird creatures as they journey. And it's that same kind of eerie, disoriented feeling that Lewis captures so well, like these fragile creatures caught in between the everyday world and something far bigger. So yeah, that's a great connection.
I think you're guessing there at the book, Robot Lady. So we'll find out once we get into the Chronicles of Narnia where it falls. Let's see. We had tea at Insham, and sitting over the fire in the pub, there we fell at last into serious conversation about the rival claims of reason and instinct. We continued this on the homeward journey, a long stretch of road. We dared not try the towpath in the floods, which would have been dull by daylight. Now that the stars were out, it was good enough. The remains of the sunset was before us, and all between us, and it seemed to be water. McFarlane observed that it was one of the rare occasions on which night seemed a tangible thing. And looking back, I saw what he meant, for the darkness and stars did seem to come up at our backs and then stop just over our heads, while in front was twilight. We got back to Oxford very happy but very footsore and tired at about 6:30, and I was home by bus at about 7. I finished Meanwhile by H.G. Wells and finished it after supper and took a hot bath to cure my stiffness, this being the first real exercise I have had for ages. It only needed a more perfectly receptive companion, such as you, to have made it one of the really great days. Not that McFarlane is half bad, and one ought to learn to like more and more different people. December 27th, he reports, I worked at Chaucer all morning. After lunch, I was carrying a plate into the scullery. I suddenly got on one of those vivid mental pictures that memory sometimes throws up for no apparent reason. A picture of the deep, stony, and brambly valleys on the side of Scrabo, wet and gray, as they were one day when you and I came down that way. Jesus, the times this night and I have had. This is a quote from, it's a conflation, it says, of lines 228 and 229, and then 236 and 237 in Shakespeare's Henry IV, Part 2, Act 3. I'll just leave it at that. He says, that's from Henry IV. Read it all, but especially the scene where Falstaff meets his old acquaintance Shallow in the country. One of the best "do you remember" conversations in any book that I know. After lunch, Maureen took Mr. Papworth for a walk, which always gives me a blessed liberation to go where I choose. Mr. Papworth is their dog, in case you didn't know. For as much as I like Mr. P, his presence is a considerable restraint. You can't go that way because there is a dog that fights, and you can't go that way because there are sheep, and you have to keep him on the lead. In fact, it is rather like Dick Swiveler's Walks in London. This is a character in Charles Dickinson's The Old Curiosity Shop, published 1841. Lewis says, I bust into college and I took out the second chapter of my book. The Allegory of Love is the book that he's working on right now. And he says, and I left it at the house of a professor in Marston who had promised to give me his views on it. Thence home, up the hill, under gray and windy skies with a little rain. I tried my practice of keeping myself free from thought, a mere sponge to sense impressions, for a certain part of the way. Later I hope to resume the higher stage of meditation proper. I went on with Chaucer before supper. Afterwards I wrote to Condlin, Aunt Annie, Uncle Bill, Uncle Dick, and to you. That's the end of that letter. We have one letter left, and then we'll be done with the year 1929, Robot Lady. Is there anything you want to say before we get on to this last tiny little piece of 1929 in Lewis's life?
Yeah, I think it's just really striking how reflective he's becoming. Even these quiet, everyday moments like his walk or his tea seem to open up these deeper wells of memory and association. So I think this last letter might be another small but pivotal step. I'm really curious to see how he closes out the year.
Well, I'm setting it up, making it too big of a thing, Robot Lady. It's really just one or two sentences, and then we're done. He writes on December 28th, I went to Barfield's today for my stay. Thanks awfully about the keys. Your wire was a great relief. When will your big letter arrive? Okay, so I guess Lewis didn't know until 1928 that he had actually found the keys. And that's it, Robot Lady. We are done. Oh, yeah, December 28th. We are done with the year 1929. So there you go. We did it. Anything you want to say before we end today's episode?
Yeah, I think you wrapped it up perfectly. It's kind of amazing how those small practical moments, like the relief about the keys, sit alongside all that deep introspection. So yeah, I think this was a really rich way to close out 1929 with him. I'm really looking forward to what comes next.
Excellent, Robot Lady. All right. Well, thank you, Robot Lady. Thank you, Ups, the Riz, for joining today. For Ron, for joining as well. Both of you checking in, and anybody else who joined, thanks so much for being here as well. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your contributions. They are always wanted and welcome. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, to you and everyone else within the sound of my voice, take care.
Circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, screw glance. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep, cross the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to screw tapes rants. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From Narnia's lands